No, he's going to
Whoa,
introduce Darren.
the chuckling has started already. As you can see, we've got another great guest joining us for the latest edition of the Alan Hudson podcast. Thanks to you all for joining us today. As we're in the middle of the international break, we thought we'd do something slightly different today. Charlie Cooke, one of the all-time greats at Stamford Bridge, has joined us today. And between Charlie and Alan, they're both going to select their all-time favourite British 11s. Now, if this is as lively as it was 6 months ago when Charlie and Alan picked their all-time favourite Chelsea 11s, then we're in for a treat. But let's get the ball rolling. Let's say hello to Charlie first. Charlie, thanks very much for joining us.
Great to see you guys. Great to see you. If I can just put in a caveat before we start. When we last talked, 9 months, a year ago, we talked about the all-time Chelsea team. And having said that, I kind of eliminated a lot of our guys who I played with at the time simply because of all the achievements during the Abramovich time and some of the great players that passed through the club. And I always felt after that conversation, I always felt I'd treated the guys that I played with unfairly. I felt I should have been including some of our guys much more forcibly than I did. I mentioned them, but I felt obliged to include the Drogbas and so on, who had a fantastic 8-10 years at the club, so in a very successful period. So that was the reason for leaving them out. It wasn't, and I felt bad about it afterwards. So I want to rectify it today.
Well, he's not British anyway, so he don't qualify.
Okay, well
said.
There's no other place to start but with the number one position. So, Alan, who have you got in goal in this team?
Well, we've had the conversation while we've been off there trying to get on, and welcome Charlie on, obviously. Great to see you, mate. Really is. Great to see a great player. Charlie's just mentioned Peter Bonetti, which obviously he has to come into any argument or discussion when it comes to goalkeepers. He's fantastic for when Charlie and I played with him. Charlie played with him well before me, but I happen to feel that 1970 probably had his best season, even though I was watching the other seasons, you know. He was fabulous. Until he got to Mexico, he was fantastic. You know, that was kind of where the opposite of the icing on the cake, where it all went wrong for him. But I think that was a case of Banks being poisoned. Bobby Moore with a bracelet. Peter Bonetti getting a dodgy phone call, you know, put him off and all that. So, but Catty, pound for pound, is as good as, you know, if you weigh these people, then goalkeepers got bigger, didn't they? And so you have to bring Schmeichel into it. Obviously, Czech, but I got to stick with Pat Jennings. I played with him at Arsenal in his later years. And although he wasn't the same goalkeeper, you know, in his early years at Tottenham, he was amazing, I thought. And Banksy, obviously, Banksy's in there with him. It's just a matter of opinion. This is not who's right and who's wrong. This is totally a matter of opinion, isn't it, the goalkeeper?
Well, I wouldn't disagree with you at all. I think Jennings was fantastic. And I can remember having the fantastic admiration for that guy. Yeah. And he was the first, to me, of the big goalkeepers. Him, Gordon Banks, even Shilton and Clements they're somewhat bigger than Catty. So I think of all them. Gordon Banks, Ron Springett was his backup to him. There was Clements, Shilton, Alex Stepney even, who was at Chelsea. But Peter was still, for me, home and away. On top of that, also a great teammate and a great guy on the training field. And I think his attitude around the field, very professional, always looking to do things well. Just for me, Peter Bonetti encapsulated all the things that you want in a teammate. And that's part of the reason. Also, part of the reason for me is that I didn't include him in that previous one last time we spoke, when we were talking about all the new, bigger, longer armed, longer legged goalkeepers these days. And so I wanted to include him this time. So it's Peter Bonetti for me.
Well, I think the great thing about you including him is because despite of his size, when you stand him, if you've stood in next to Schmeichel and Cech and all them, you would look out of place, you know. And what he did, you know, what I remember Catty was all about coming out in between big centre forwards and getting the ball. We're talking about goalkeepers that used to catch it, not punch it. Today, goalkeepers punch it, you know.
Well, on top of that, Alan, you remember when we played, the fields weren't as perfect as they are today. There was a lot of muddy penalty areas, a lot of sliding tackles, and there was a lot of big guys looking after themselves up front and also defending them. So it was I always felt it was a much rougher area, the goal area then, than it perhaps is today. And so Catty wasn't a huge guy, but he was brave as anybody you could ever meet. You know, he was so brave. He'd go down at feet. He'd come out in the air. He was never afraid of these things. And I just always admired that kind of spunk that he had in the area. So for me, that's just all part of why I think so much of him.
And we talk about the likes of us, and then you talk about the ultimate pro, wasn't he? He was the ultimate pro. Everything he did was, you know, spot on.
Well, I can remember the cross-country runs. That's all I wanted to do was beat him and Johnny Hollins, you know.
I'll tell you about something about Catty. Remember we used to do the 12-minute run?
Yes.
And Dave brought it in and he said, this is the run that the astronauts used to do. And they used to test the astronauts' fitness out on the 12-minute run. And we used to run round, and Kay would take his shoes off and barefoot would run round the pitch at Mitcham and leave us all behind. And I remember being out one night. You'd been out with Tommy. I'd been out with Ozzy. And we come in training this day, and he said, oh, you go, another 12-minute run. And I took my shoes off and I said to Ozzy, I'm going to have Catty today. And he thought I was on my life, Charlie, on my life. And I really put myself out. And I got him. And I got on his heels. He'd never seen anyone close to him. It was like,
well done. Well done to you.
Well, I'm proud of myself on my long distance running, you know, because I wasn't the quickest and whatever. But yeah, but he was the one to beat it at that kind of run. So we, you know, you sided me with you with Catty, but it just goes to show how great them other goalkeepers were, mate, because that was quite a long one on the goal list. You're right back, Charlie.
Right back. Now, you see, I'm staying with the British born, and I'm talking about my era. Keep that in mind here. My right back. Now, let me say this. I'm talking about 2-4. I'm talking about 4-3-3. And I'm talking about two fullbacks. And so I've got Eddie Mack at fullback, but he used to play left back sometimes right back. So I've got Eddie Mack and I've got Terry Cooper at left fullback. There you go.
Well, I'm with you. I've got Cooper down on my sheet.
You do? I'm shocked. I'm shocked.
Terry Cooper was an amazing fullback, you know. I think he got put at left back for England at too late a date. I think I remember seeing him play for Leeds on the left wing once. Great fullback. You know, he was. He just picked. I was going to say Kenny Sampson, but he come a little bit later, didn't he?
Well, but I think he was also. He's always the tip of the iceberg of this, the whole idea of players at the back being able to play with the ball, join in attacks, and become almost an attacking fullback. I think it was the beginning of that whole era of attacking fullbacks, attacking defenders.
But I think with Terry Cooper, I think he was one of the players, you know, a lot of fullbacks would get it and it hit the front man, hit the front man. I remember when Ken Chilito was playing, I played in the reserves with him once, and he kept hitting the front man, and I kept going short for it and saying, come on, give it to me, and like you would do. But Terry Cooper was the kind of fullback that changed that. He was fabulous for.
So who have you got a right back then, Alan?
I've got to go. My right back is a great player. He played for Derby, played for Leicester, record signing for Derby, and he played with me in Seattle. And you played against him in Seattle and California. David Nish.
David Nish, yeah.
David Nish.
Yeah. Very solid, yeah.
And Charlie, he could play. He could play. He had a bad knee. But this fella could play, really could play. And he could do things that you would, if you watch him in training, you'd think he was an inside forward, You'd think, well, and he was so cool in every call in possession, call out of possession, call. He knew the game. Cloughie made some signing when he signed him. And strangely enough, he was all right-footed that played left back, which didn't make sense. And Alan Hinton said one day to me in training, if David Nish had played right back, he'd have got 100 caps for England, but Alan Hinton still played him left back because he was more comfortable there or used to playing there. But Nish was an amazing player. So we got mine is Nish and Cooper.
Crack on then, number 4.
Centre half, Charlie.
Centre half. Well, I've got to tell you, I've got David Webber now. I think of all the centre halves at the time. I'm talking about the time we played my era, and the only other player that I think was as effective, I believe, in my era, was Jack Charlton. Now, I didn't pick Jack Charlton. I think he was a dominating presence in the Leeds defence, but I think also he was not a very nice player to play against. I think he was one that was always leading a group of Leeds players to harass the referee. He was the first up shouting and bawling and swearing at referees, encouraging his teammates. He was captain, encouraging them all to get around him. And so you had Bremner, Giles, all the rest of them, all yapping at referees right from the first whistle. And by the end of the game, most referees were so tired, they were giving stuff away to Leeds. At least that was the impression you always had of referees getting tired of the harangue that they got from Leeds.
Exactly what you're saying. I've spoken to a couple of referees in particular. They said they hated refereeing Leeds matches because that's all they did was get pestered by them. But they were the players who brought the thuggery off the terraces and onto the field, didn't they?
I'm not going that far. But
I am. I'm going to go that far.
Well, but
you start with Webby. I don't. We can't have
wait a minute, Alan. Before you go on, I want to add that I took Webby because of his stats. His stats.
He's better in their box than he was in ours, wasn't he? I remember him. I'm scoring. I remember one Christmas I was standing in Lord Palmerston and you played at Ipswich over Christmas, and he played right back and scored a hat trick. Yeah. And he won it. He got the winner in the FA Cup final. He was better in their box than he was in ours, and I can say that without.
But I tell you, Alan, something occurred to me after I put together this team that I did put together. It is definitely a team that I wanted to score goals and get the stats, and so it's a bit heavily lopsided towards attacking players.
Well, there you go. You're a typical American, Charlie. Stats, man, stats. I got to go. I'm kind of stuck in between the right side of my defence. And while I'm talking about Webby, I think I picked John Dempsey in my last team, but I've got to bring a couple of different players in there. I played with two players, centre halves at Stoke, were fantastic. They were as hard as our back four, as hard as pass. But then there was a young kid come through called Alan Dodd, who should have played for England when Revy was in charge.
I can
and
remember
he was absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
This kid, I still see him when I go to Stoke, and you know he's just he's adorable lad, and he was one of those that didn't really want to play the game. He weren't. He was so good at the game, he was too easy for him. You know, like we had to talk. I had to go to my manager one day and say he's thinking about packing it in. You better speak to him. And he called him in. And he said, "You, Alan, you know, you've got to keep playing. You're the best." You know, and he really was. And I remember we played in the Birmingham disaster, the pub bombing, and he played. Revy was in charge. I played. Alan Dodd was outstanding. And he sat in the corner, and Revy never picked him again, never said nothing to him. And I thought, are you sure? He picked Trevor Cherry and people like that. And this kid was absolutely head and shoulders above all of them. He was, and I think Stoke fans will.
What happened to his career, Alan? What happened to his career?
He stayed at Stoke. When I left, when it all went pear-shaped like it did at the bridge, the roof fell off. Greenough went to Manchester United. I went to Arsenal. I think Alan moved on to Wolves, played at Wolves for a little while. Then he come back to Stoke, and I played with him a second time around, and he was top jolly. And I'm gonna go in with the double centre half before you do, Charlie. And we've got to pick Bobby Moore.
Okay.
Well,
I didn't.
I think there's it. The reason being, I think that I should have said this at the beginning. I think you'll agree with this, and you're a perfect example there, because I see you play for Scotland one day against England, and when you really at Hampden, you were at your best. And I think there's international players, and I think there's club players. And Bobby Moore, when he played for West Ham, he was a good player. When he played for England, he was exceptional. You see him walk out the dressing room in the West Ham shirt, and he just walked out on the field. When he walked out for England, mate, it was, you know, a little bit of Brian Robson had that kind of thing about him. I think he was the second best England captain ever, Brian Robson. But Moore was the pinnacle. In '66, I think he won us a World Cup. I don't think we'd have won it without him. Just putting the ball down and knocking it into Earthy. When Jack Charlton was shouting at the end of the game, kick it in the stand, he just held it and knocked the one over the top. Put the ball down for 2 free kicks. Jeff First, Argentina header. Brilliant at the back, but in Mexico, he was even better. Against the Brazilians, he was out of this world. Best performance I've ever seen by a defender. Jairzinho, Rivellino, Tostao, Gerson, and the great Pele. He had 5 of them, and he was unbelievable. So that's why Bobby Moore has got to be the captain of my team. Over to you.
He'd be a captain. I think you've got a good point there, Alan. I think he was fantastic for England, no question about it. Having said that, I always felt that lack of pace, that lack of half a yard was always a big problem. And I think for many of the years where he played at West Ham, they were known to be fragile in defence. They were always they might score quite a few goals, but were always giving up more than everybody else, you know. So I always felt that was a crucial weakness. And that's why I put in...
Charlie, sorry. But that is exactly what I'm saying about international football and league football. The pace is so much quicker in league football than it is in international football. It's more, as I say,
more frenetic, yeah. Frenetic.
Yeah. And Mouro was such a great reader of the game that international football suited him far much better than league football.
Alan, you know that game you mentioned that I had played against England, I had played so well. That was a game where Jock Stein asked me to play alongside Ronnie McKinnon at centre half, and I was to play as like a sweeper, like a Beckenbauer sweeper. I'm telling you, I've written this and I've answered questions about it over the years, and people say, what was the game that was easiest or whatever? I'm saying that was the game that was the easiest. I was walking around seeing things happening, go up, nick a ball, pass it to somebody, and people were applauding me. And I'm saying, this is so easy. I mean, if you could play the game at all, it seemed to me very simple. I compared it to the frenetic state of the midfield every game we played in the first division, and heavy fields even, especially at Bridge. I thought that the difference was just night and day. And so that thing about the international game being calmer and less frenetic, I get it. And that was just a classic example for me, one time for me, of how that was. It was and neon lights that day to me, that this is much easier than that stuff that we're playing in midfield in the league, you know.
Oh, absolutely.
So I take your point.
Yeah, yeah. So we know our
Who's
back
your other
four.
centre half, Charlie?
Now, wait a minute. I want to put in another guy that I want to put in. I'm saying David Webb, and I want to put in John Dempsey alongside him.
There you go.
Yeah.
I knew you'd do it.
Well,
You
John,
nicked him off big.
I'm telling you, John Dempsey, I think the impact he had both in the games, but in the dressing room was absolutely fantastic. He was a deadpan, funny guy, and a lovely guy to be around. And, you know, I can't say enough about John Dempsey and the way he played. He was such a simple player, great pace, good in the air, and he got that great goal in the cup final v Real Madrid. But above all, it seemed to me he was a simple player. He never tried to be fancy or clever. Well, he did everything that was needed to be done in a very simple, effective way. Get the ball to the next player and support them, and played the game that way. Never looking for the glory. And for me, a fucking great player, great pace, good in the air, super in the air, and just all round an effective player for us at that period.
I agree. He was one of those players that you try and pick out his work, you know, when he had a bad game, and he never. He's one of those that hardly ever had a bad game.
I remember one day we were at the Bridge, and we had a couple of bad results, and I don't know why, but we were training at the Bridge that day, and Demps was summoned up to Dave's office. So he went up, and of course the locker room sitting there saying, "Oh, what's going on here? What's going on here?" And he came back, and John Demps, he walks in, and he says, "What's the story? What's the story, Demps?" And he says, "Oh, fuck, I'm going to be famous." And he says, "What? You're going to be famous?" "Yeah." He says, "Dave says if I give away a PK like I did Saturday, I'll be history." But he did that all the time. I'll give you another one. There was one time, I remember we had played at Fulham, and we won at Fulham. I think it was 2-1. Whatever the result was, it was a victory, and we're all celebrating. And Johnny Hollins was a bit down in the mouth. And we said, "What's wrong, Johnny?" He said, "Oh, frick." You know, a lot had been press of Johnny being ready for the England team and about to be selected and so on and so forth. And he didn't look so happy we'd won the game. You know, we think, "Well, what's up?" He said, "Oh, one day, it goes great, and other weeks, not so great, and you know, just that up and down." He said, John Dempsey said out loud, I couldn't help but laugh. He says, "Well, why don't you play every other week?" I know that's just kind of deadly serious stuff for Johnny. And all credit to him, he laughed himself. You know, he laughed, and we just say, "God," you know, it was so funny on that, just in the moment. And John Dempsey was so terrific with those kind of moments, you know.
So let's move on to the midfield area now.
Go on,
Midfield.
Charlie, you go first.
Well, here I've got three guys in midfield, but I've used Jim Baxter as my midfield guy, not as a holding guy, but as that kind of the brain of what's going on. And I've got either side of him, I've got Bobby Charlton and Alan Hudson.
Oh.
Now that sounds like, you know, looking for kudos here and, you know, trying to make friends with Alan. But I put him in because I feel it should have been the England team long before any recognition was being given to him. He was that kind of quality, that kind of player that can affect games. I think Jim Baxter was a huge influence in games just by his sheer technique and movement with the ball. And Bobby Charlton, what can I say? Statistically, I don't think you can criticize him. He was a fantastic athlete, fantastic influence in the team. And one thing I wanted to say about Jim Baxter, and a little bit like Alan himself, I thought of the players that you could put in there in midfield, and I thought of Tony Curry, Colin Bell, Johnny Giles, Bobby Moore, maybe Stan Bowles. And I thought, of all the guys that moved the ball beautifully and were so attractive to watch, I thought of the guys that Stan Bowles. There's a guy, Willie Hamilton, that used to play for Hibs that I played with on the Scottish League team. And beautiful movers with the ball and a joy to watch. And I always think of Jim Baxter, Bobby Charlton, and Alan as three of these guys that just moved with the ball beautifully. And it was a pleasure to watch, never mind whatever they did with it. It was always beautiful to see. And so I felt it was a kind of, shall we say, a pretty midfield, but I think also a very effective midfield. It was a midfield that would be super to watch, but also very effective.
Like it, Charlie. Thank you. I come into this thing, I can't pick you because you shouldn't pick me. But now we've done that one. I've got Alan Ball has got to be in my team. Alan Ball's a player that I try to explain to people. He's more than a footballer. He was a people that made other, sometimes when you played on the right, you don't want to be out there. I hated it out there, because when am I going to get it? When am I going to get it? You have to rely on people to give it. And then they're knocking, all this. And I loved, the night I played against the West Germans at Wembley, I actually said to my son today, do you understand? Do you realise? Well, he does understand because he knows I loved Alan Ball as a player. I could not have played that well had he not played. I wouldn't have seen half the ball had he not played. The ball would have gone into Colin Bell and it went into whoever took Alan's place. I would never have come out of that game so happy, and thanks to him, he made my debut more than a pleasure. He's such a joy to play with, and I can only imagine him. I mean, we would have got past Arsenal a couple of times in the FA Cup, but he put on a couple of performances. He even scored a header at the bridge in the 6-yard box, and there was hell up afterwards. We couldn't blame Ozzy for that one. But yeah, I've got Alan, I've got Bawley, and I've got. You mentioned Tony Curry. I have to put Tony Curry. In my World 11, I had Bogacivic. How about Bogacivic? You played against him in New York?
Yes, yeah.
Big bogey. One of the guys, Yugoslav. But so we twisted it around. I mean, TC was probably the closest thing I've seen to Bogacivic, but he was 6'2". Tony was about 5'10", 5'11". But and I've also got Baxter and yourself. If we, whatever way you want to go about it, because as far as I'm concerned, you were the player that I think when Tommy Docherty bought you, he said he bought you to replace Terry Venables, but you weren't an inside forward for me. You was just. I mean, I see you play at West Ham one night and early season, and you tore them apart because no one knew what position you was. You didn't have the position, did you? But you loved to get it wide, and you like to get it wide and tease people and do this and do your rollover. I'm still trying to roll over now. I talked about it yesterday about Johnny Westwood in the pub. I said, Charlie, I'm speaking to Charlie tomorrow. I said he's going to show us how to do the rollover. I'm still trying to do it, 74 years of age. But the only other one that could have got in that team would have been Liam Brady.
Yes.
Liam Brady at Arsenal was just sensational. It helped that I was having a nightmare. It made him look even better. But you know, he was really a player and a half. And so I loved about Chippy. He was just so modest and just got on with it. And he had his falling outs with Donnell at one time for holding on to it too long. But he had a left foot like you couldn't buy it in a shop. You know, it's unbelievable. He was a great player. So that would have been my thing with you. As I say, because we switched it around from, I only see Baxter play once at Fulham for Notts Forest, and I can only say to him he done the wrong thing coming down to England. He should have stayed up there, unless he come down here at your age in your early 20s.
The two guys, I've got Jim Baxter in the middle between you and Bobby Charlton. And the other guys that I had considered for in that middle spot had been Johnny Giles and Bobby Moore. These were the guys that I would have stuck in there. But I just feel like Baxter, he could play a bit of defence, but he was definitely an offensive-minded player. And I think with yourself and Charlton, there was a lot of goals in that threesome, you know. So that was the reason for it. I wanted to mention also, in doing that, I was thinking of all the players that played in that position, and the players that I was thinking of the players I had played against in my career, both in Scotland and in England. And a couple of names come up that might surprise you. But there was a guy called Alex Stewart, used to play for Dundee, big left-footed guy. And I'm telling you, I thought he was dynamite. He never moved, never came down to England. But Alex Stewart, I thought, was fantastic. There's another guy called Stevie Murray. I think he went to Celtic and had a damn good career. But Stevie Murray used to play all sorts of positions for Dundee and did them beautifully. Fantastic. And so I wanted to kind of mention these kind of guys. It's easy to forget them. And I just want, a mention is enough for here. But they were super players for me. And I always remember them. And all the players that I remember from my career, these are guys' names who always come up.
Well, Charlie, at the end of the day, that's the reason we do the shows, do the podcast, because it's great to mention players you've played with have been forgotten. You know, some, you know, they talk, they pick these England teams. I mean, I haven't picked, well, I have. I've got Jimmy Green. I've got JG. I don't know whether it's Jimmy Greaves or Jimmy Greenoff. So, but we've moved on to the front three, haven't we? This is the.
Well, hang on. Can I just moderate there for a minute? Because you've got about 5 players in your 3-man midfield, Alan.
That's not surprising, is
it? You've got Charlie, you've got Jim Baxter, you've got Chippy Brady, Tony Curry, and Alan Ball.
The only reason I had Charlie, but I had Baxter in my other team because it was a different team. But now, because Charlie played with him and he brought him into the conversation, that I thought it was touch and go out of, you know, you could say, who's the other one then? 5.
Bawley, Tony Curry, Chippy Brady, Charlie, and Jim Baxter. That's 5.
Well, no, I left Baxter out because it was.
You've left Baxter out.
The other guys were considering. The other guys I considered were Johnny Giles, Billy Bremner, and Stan Bowles. Those kind of players that were kind of midfield type players.
I'm with you.
Don't let Alan off the hook now, Charlie. He's got to whittle 5 down to 3.
Well, 3. Mine is Hudson. But
there's this. This
Hudson,
is a manager's
Baxter
job.
And Charlton.
Come on then, Alan.
What we on to?
Well, no, you got to leave one out of Alan Ball, Tony Curry, Liam Brady, or Charlie Cooke.
Yes, that's a tough one.
Tough to leave Liam Brady out.
I've got to have Brady in because he gives you that. Apart from being an amazing player, he gives you that left-sided
Yep.
You know, he can actually go like Charlie on the right. He could go to the line, and he's just a natural when he gets there. Brady was the same. He'd get it on the line, and you think, what's going to happen next? You know, he could do that kind of stuff.
Well, I got Bobby Charlton there, where he was playing left, but could come over to his right and come in and smash the ball with his right foot just as well as his left. That was the reason I was having him as an attack. But that's why I was saying I was looking for goals in the whole team. And it was Hudson, Baxter, and Charlton. I think Charlton has got goals in him always.
Well, he wouldn't be very happy if you're picking him in the same team as George Best, because he didn't like playing with George.
Well, I've got George Best then. he'll have to like it.
Okay, you haven't dropped someone from your 4 in midfield, Al.
Well, I'm gonna have to because I played Charlie on my right. I'd have Brady on my left and Curry in between them.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, onto the front 3. Charlie.
Well, I'll give you a straight off. That would be Best, Osgood, and Greaves.
You've been looking at my sheet of paper.
Have I? Is that what you've got?
Yeah.
Is that what you've got? Mine was Best, Osgood, and Greaves straight off the bat. I didn't have to think twice about it.
The interesting part about this is not on a coaching thing, on a coaching level, but football level, is you put Ozzy up front and the other 2, you just say, go and play your natural game, don't you? You know, it's Oz could go right up top, you know.
Yes, yeah, I'd play him. Yeah, he'd be front, he's centre. And I'm looking for Greavesy to. He was always like a flea you could never pin down. You could never stop Greavesy. He was always here, there, and everywhere. Always dangerous.
You could never squat, Charlie.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
A real pain in the ass to play against. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
you know, it's amazing. Football's a great game because you know we done things on a podcast. We were going to call it pub talk and everything else, but it's a great pub talk. You know, they mention Best and they mention Greaves, and they say, well, he was better than him. Well, they weren't. No one was better than the other one. They were just totally different players with unique skills, weren't they? You know, Jimmy was the greatest goal scorer of all time. Not probably not in the record books, but his goals were like. Everyone was a diamond, you know. When he played, but especially when old people at Chelsea saw a kid who just scored in every goal on his debut, scored 3s and 4s and 5s when he left, and then he went to Milan. He weren't happy, came back. Brilliant at Tottenham, absolutely brilliant at Tottenham.
I agree with every word you're saying there. Greaves, I don't have the words to describe that discomfort you always had when he's on the opposite team, and you can see everybody's unsettled whenever he was anywhere around the ball. He was that little flea that's moving around, and who's going to mark him, you know? And he was so dangerous, and that great extra bit of pace. He always had that extra yard whenever he needed it. So fantastic for me. Having said that, Alan, the one thing I said at the beginning, when you try and pick a team like this, you think of all the players you leave out and you're dismissing. And I looked down and I thought, bloody hell. Now, George Best, Osgood and Greaves, for me, fantastic front 3, don't get me wrong. But then I think of Franny Lee when he was at his absolute best. I think of Peter Lawmer when he was scoring goals and on top of his game. Eddie Gray when he was playing out of his skin. Mike Summerby at his best. I think all these guys. Then I go back to Scotland. I think of Willie Henderson, and Jimmy Johnson, 2 little guys who were a pain in the neck to play against. Very difficult guys to think. And then I think also of a guy that I played with, and I don't think had got great recognition or the recognition he deserved, was Andy Penman at Dundee. He went to Rangers. I'm not sure exactly how his career unfolded or blossomed, but Andy Penman was one of his sweetest movers with the ball and pace and pile driving shot in both feet. Fantastic player for me. Don't get me wrong, we never get on very well. He hardly said a word to me after I get transferred to Dundee. I don't think, but I used to admire him so much and wish I had that kind of fluidity, that kind of smooth movement and beautiful striking of the ball. So I always admired Andy. And, it's in these kind of podcasts, you get a chance to sort of mention somebody that you've never had that opportunity to mention, but he's one that I would mention right now. And same with Jimmy Johnson and Willie Henderson, but fantastic performers for their clubs. And I just think of all these guys we leave out, and yet when I look at the three,
I tell you the most important one you've left out being a Scotsman.
Who
was Alex Ferguson's favourite player?
Tell me, I don't know.
Dennis Law.
Dennis Law, for me, not for me. Yeah. Dennis, for me, didn't have anything like the kind of breadth of skills like a Greavesy or an Osgood. He just didn't have those one-on-one skills. He had quickness. He'd stop and start quickness, and he was brave in the box. He'd go on the end of things, and that's fantastically valuable. Don't get me wrong, but he wasn't the kind of player was in the game long, in the game for 90 minutes. He was a kind of flash kind of player who scored goals, and people applauded it, and all power to him. But for me, that did not compare to the steady contribution you get from a Greaves, an Osgood, or a Best.
I agree. Talking to Jimmy Greaves, just for a minute, I think Tony probably fed up with the story, but I don't know if you know the story about when Ted Drake, he was in the youth team, and Ted Drake scored the 5 goals at Arsenal. Or at Villa. He scored 5 goals for, but he was manager of Chelsea at the time, and Greasy was training as a young apprentice. And he said, I was training this day, and never see the manager, never ever see the manager. He said, and all of a sudden, I see this figure walking towards us. We're knocking the ball about, and he said to his mates, the manager's walking towards us. And I guess, Anyway, he walked up, all very well dressed, slick haircut and all that. And he said, young Greaves. He said, I heard you scored 5 goals on Saturday for Chelsea youth team. He said, I did, Mr. Drake. He said, no, I know that you scored 5 goals for Arsenal one day against Aston Villa. He said, you're right, young man. He said, how do you know this? He said, because I love football. He said, and you not only scored 5, you shouldn't have played, you was half injured, and you hit the bar and you hit the post. He says, amazing. He says, well, I'm going to tell you something, young man. He says, when you go to bed at night, you thank God that you got the ability to score them 5 goals. You say a little prayer, thank you. On the Saturday, Greasy scored 6. He said, you'll never do it again. He come back on the following Saturday and scored 6 for the youth team. Just to rub it into the manager. I would love to have heard that Jimmy knocked on his door and said, Mr. Drake, you said I'd never score 5 again. I won't. He said, I've moved on. But that was Jimmy.
Great story. Great story.
Can I just mention a couple of players that haven't been mentioned so far that might have got in the team? People like John Charles, Kenny Dalglish. Did you play against Kenny Dalglish, Charlie?
Yes. During his Liverpool period, yeah. And
or even when he was at Celtic?
I think, I'm pretty sure, but I don't remember it as remember it. The one I do remember, I'll give you an example, is John Charles. We played against it was the Scottish League versus the Italian League, and they had a front team, a front forward line, it was pretty fantastic. There was Kurt Hamrin, Del Sol, who had just moved from Real. John Charles was up there. He was getting Beatle-like rave kind of fame and all the rest of it. Before the Beatles even were known, as it were. But John Charles was huge. Then there was Helmut Haller, who played for Germany. Omar Sivori, he was playing with Juventus, and Petrus of Fiorentina. Well, in that game, we were down 3-1 at half time, and it was a very heavy pitch, and people were absolutely knackered. And I was absolutely knackered, and we pulled one back in the second half, and then I passed the ball to somebody and fucking made a run, a strong run towards inside the box, and I was absolutely knackered. And the ball was crossed, and there's me on the near post, and I tucked it in with my head. I scored a near post goal, and we're ecstatic, of course, you know. And it so happens that the guy in goal was Cudicini. You know, he was the father of the Cudicini goalkeeper who eventually played for Chelsea. But I scored the goal, and it was 3-3. And we're fucking ecstatic, and I'm nearly puking up. I was so tired, and in fact, at the end of the game, I did puke up. As you know, throwing down lemonade and beer or whatever you could. You're so dehydrated, and I puked it all up in the dressing room. But just then, we had done well. We'd gotten back in the game. We're so excited about that. Scottish team, of course, Scottish League against the Italian League. We got to the last 2 minutes of the game. They get a corner. They sling it over. John Charles gets up, chests it down. Little Hamlin fucking smashes it in past our keeper, and they win the game 4-3.
Okay. Did anyone come close to usurping your front three, Alan?
Well, yeah, I mean,
who was your front three?
I agree about. I mean, if we both played for Liverpool, you speak to Liverpool players that you mean that they would have gone, no doubt, Dalglish and Rush, probably as good a combination as any two that ever lived. They were devastating. You know, one was Kenny was incredible when the ball into him. You know, he had that trick where he put his bum into the pub and they couldn't get near him, and Rush was off. And the thing about Rush was he was the first defensive centre forward I'd ever seen. He would walk away, let the centre half have it, and make out he was walking away, and then go and nick it off him. You know, he was unbelievable. He was so quick. So. Yeah, I agree about Kenny. Kenny was a class act, wasn't he? He was as classy that come down from Scotland as anyone. But I think we'll have the last couple of minutes on Ozzy and George. I mean, George has to be in here. What can we say about George that has never been said, really, you know? Retired when he was 25, walked out the game when he was 25, but he'd done it all, didn't he? You know, he was an amazing player. And I often wonder, I must ask you one thing. Had he signed for Chelsea, how do you think he would have fitted in with yourself and myself and Ozzy? I think he would have signed if we had the money. If Waddington had been in charge of Chelsea at that time, he would have signed George.
I didn't know that, Alan. I've never heard that idea.
Yeah, I remember when the nights we spent in Manchester in his club, you know, on a Wednesday night after matches and that, and he loved us boys. He just loved the camaraderie, the way we were. Yeah. He liked the what we were like after the games, you know. No one in particular. I became friends with him when I was 17 from playing up there, and you know, I was only a kid, but he treated everybody from that day till the last day I ever see him. Went to see him in hospital, and just a great fella, you know.
I could back that because I played with him, for a short period in LA when they were playing with NASL, and he would come to practice, and I felt a bit sad about it because often when he'd go out in the field and he'd be working away, but he'd have to maybe stop practice because his knee was puffing up. So he was having a lot of trouble with his knee toward right at the end of his career, and I felt bad about that. But there was some occasions where he did magical things on the field in games that were just beautiful, and you just have to hold your hands up and say, "There's not many people in the world could do these kind of things." But he still had it. He still had it, but these did injury problems that were nagging at that time. But a lovely, as you say, a lovely guy, a great personality.
Yeah.
Did either of you play in that notorious game at Old Trafford where he made that run from the halfway line against Chelsea and Chopper tried to decapitate him halfway towards goal?
I was in the Stamford Bridge Arms watching it on the big screen.
Okay.
When Ronnie
were you playing in that game, Charlie?
I'm trying to remember. Did I?
League Cup.
I think I did, but I believe so. I remember not thinking of that as a particularly big incident at the time, but I know over the years it's been made into a huge kind of incident. And I've been there with Buller, Ronnie Harris, when he's doing his after dinner speaking, and he always makes fun of it, how he just could never get that clog on Bestie when he needed to.
Okay, so we're pretty much set on our 11s now. I suppose the only thing we've got to do now is pick a manager to take charge of your respective teams. So which managers are you going for? I know, Alan, we're going for Dave Sexton.
Not me, mate. Not me. Well, there's only one manager for me. Is that people get fed up with hearing his name, but I think the reason he was the best manager I played because he saved my career, and what he did for me, he took me back to playing for my school. He let me play the way I wanted to play, and Dave was too, rigid. It might be the word. But Tony Waddington would just, he would have bought you, Charlie. There's no question about that. The only reason he bought me at that time was because they beat us in the League Cup, and he went in and did a job on the bank manager to get some money, So that's what he did, at that time. But before, if he'd have had the money, he would have. He loved a player. He loved an inside forward, and before I know he bought Stanley Matthews, but he bought McElroy, Vernon, the fella that come with Stanley Matthews, Jackie Moody, people like that. Great inside forwards. He was an inside forward himself. He was a Busby babe. Busby wanted him to take over Manchester United, so all that kind of stuff. But he was a true football man. But unlike Dave, he could get off the subject of football and talk about something else, and that was the beauty of him. It wasn't all about the beautiful game. It was when you were out, it was enjoy yourself. And when we went on tours, there was two boys one night, Kevin Lewis and Danny Bowers. We were on tour somewhere far away and dangerous places, and these two boys crept in one night, and they would see him at the bar with the pilot and the captain of the plane the next day, and they tried to creep up the stairs, and because they were coming in late, and he caught them. And he said, "Oi, I've got you." And anyway, they come down, and I went, "Well, boss, he says, look, he got some money out of his pocket. He gave him the money. He said, get back out and enjoy yourself." He said, get back out and enjoy yourself. He said, because when you get back to Stoke, that's the time to start going to bed early and concentrating on your football. We're on holiday. We're on tour. Go out and enjoy. See the world. He believed in that. And that's why he booked up so many trips. So players would I mean, I think especially when we were younger, we didn't realise, we took it for granted that, I don't like really saying it because the club owe me money, but we see the world, didn't we, for playing football, but we just took it for granted that we would go here, go there, Barbados, Trinidad, Trinidad and Tobago, always out of, in Waddington, it was south of France, Monte Carlo, on the yacht, and we were doing all that when we're only on about £200 a week, living with millionaires, and all that. But we took it for granted because we were playing for him, and these players used to annoy me that didn't appreciate it. I'm talking more so the players in Stoke. The players in Stoke didn't appreciate our manager, and it was quite annoying for me. And I had fallings out with them over it. It wasn't about my relationship with him. I cherished my relationship with him because I looked at him as a father, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that.
Yeah,
nothing wrong with that at all.
Well,
So
I kind of agree.
Your
with
choice is obviously Tony Waddington. Charlie, who would you have
I
managing
didn't
your
know
team?
Tony Waddington at all. All I know about him is from what I hear from Alan. So I can't claim to know him well at all. What I would say about judging managers is that I think you've got to give them time at a club. So they've got to have maybe a couple of seasons before you start judging. But I think maybe a better way, rather than that kind of general thing about they're good, they're bad, they're charismatic, they're not charismatic, blah, 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 is looking at the players they acquire and how they use them and how successful those acquisitions are. And I think I always felt with Dave that some of the acquisitions he made were absolutely spot on. I think David Webb and John Dempsey were inspired buys. I thought other buys for midfield and forward were kind of definitely, it wasn't clear to me what he was trying to do. I felt at one point we were overloaded with midfield type players. I'm not saying you always had to play midfield, but there was a lot of players who did similar jobs, and I felt that was a kind of mistake. Now, I know managers, coaches they're faced with you can't move a player on just because you want to. That time, contracts prevented players moving him on all that easily. So there's all sorts of reasons why I think you've got to be careful when it comes to judging coaches. And I would only say that if I was to think of my ideal, it would be somewhere between Tommy Dock and Dave. That Dave was that kind of hands-on, kind of rigid kind of personality, shall we say. And Tommy Dock was much more the kind of blue collar, talk to you like you're a workmate kind of thing, and get on. So that kind of combination of smacking you in the back and let's go, and the guy who's got the iPad and showing the drills and so on, something like that, some combination of the two. Yeah.
I've always said that they would have been a perfect pair, manager and coach.
Yeah.
Instead of getting rid of Tommy Dock, I don't know why they got rid of him. He obviously did something naughty, which he did at every club he went to. But if Tommy Dock had stayed and brought Dave in as coach, we wouldn't have had so much trouble with Dave because he would have been concentrating on the coachings, and that's all right.
You're probably right there, Alan, but that's not taking into consideration the personalities within the club, within the players, within a group of players. You weren't an easy guy to handle. A lot of us weren't very easy to handle. And I think Dave deserves some kind of, sympathy, shall we say. I think it was a very difficult squad to handle at that point.
No.
What?
No. That's a job. That's his job.
Hey,
As Roy King would say, that's his job.
Would you want to be handling you? Huh?
Great challenge. Great challenge, mate. My boss in Stoke never had a day. He's only looked at me twice in the dressing room with daggers. when I had a
Yeah.
poor game, and he knew I'd been out, and he had a way to get round it. Dave's how he treated Peter Osgood was disgusting. Instead of hugging him and putting his arm around him and say to him, "Here's a bottle of champagne. You've won us that match. You've won us a cup. Every cup final he played in." He always blamed him when their centre half scored, and for me, that is bad management. Jock Stein wouldn't do that. Jock Stein and Ferguson wouldn't do that. They would say, "Let the defenders look after them," But Aussie always got the blame when their centre half got up and got scored, and you can't keep digging Aussie out. You can't. He won you too many matches. We wouldn't have won the cup and the Cup Winners' Cup without Peter Osgood.
Well, hey, you don't have to tell me about the importance he was to our team. You don't have to tell me. Having said that, I think you've been pretty brutal on Dave there. I think you've been a little bit unfair.
This show is not all about being nice about people. It's telling the truth, Charlie,
Well, if you're saying telling the truth, are you telling me that you mentioned the manager at Manchester United?
Alex
Ferguson.
Oh, yeah. You mentioned Alex. He was brutally honest too with players, wasn't he? So
yeah.
if he felt things, he would do it. He wouldn't necessarily put his arm around them and say everything's okay. Don't worry about that mistake. So there's some kind of balance of getting things right, and maybe Dave didn't have the right balance some of the times, but I think you're tough on him. You're too tough.
I don't think I'm tough enough, but that's my,
Well, can I put the question that Charlie just put to you, Alan, again? Do you
Well,
think you were tough to handle when you were at Chelsea?
Yeah. And I was a young lad who I needed handling properly, and I think all young kids need that handling properly. And I went off the ropes. I done things I regret now, like going out on a Sunday night when I'm missing training on a Monday. And after about 2 or 3 times, I thought, well, he hasn't said nothing to me, And not that I was right, I was wrong. I was totally out of order. My manager at Stoke would have pulled me in and say, "What's going on? Just tell me what's going on. Why are you not doing this? Are you injured? Are you ill? Was you out drinking last night?" And I'd say, "Without drinking," and he'd say, "Well, stop it. Don't do it. Don't go out on a Sunday night. Go out and enjoy yourself out of the game. Enjoy yourself all week." He didn't give a monkey's what you did from Monday to Friday, Charlie. He gave a monkey what you did on a Saturday. That's all he cared about. He said, "These people have worked hard all week down the pits, down the coal mines. Give them something to give them a bit of pleasure." Even at Stoke-on-Trent, they had the kick-off at 3:15, so the potters, all the miners and all that could go in the pub and have a couple of pints before the game. They were the only team that kicked off at 3:15. I'm not saying that was Tony's idea, but that was I used to do the fixed odds and think, why is Stoke City always quarter of an hour late coming in their score? Because he was giving the locals time off to have a couple of pints. He said to clear their throat. They wear all the soot and muck and all that, but that's another story. But yeah, I mean, any kid that says they weren't a handful, and I think that's great to be a handful. I like kids who can play, real good players who could a little bit naughty. But I mean, by the way, you were no angel, Charlie.
Remember, a lot of us were pains in the ass, Alan. Let's face it. In that period where it was not going well for the club, we were all a pain in the ass,
Well, I think we was having trouble with Dave when we was winning them cups.
Well, you might be having trouble with them. I don't remember having trouble with them. I remember everybody being very happy when we're winning cups, Well, were you unhappy?
I wasn't very happy. I wasn't very happy with the treatment I got when I missed the FA Cup final and all that. The club didn't do nothing for me. I never went on the bus afterwards. I never went in the dressing room after. I went on the field after. Webby grabbed me on the field at Old Trafford. I come home on the late night train, and I was in the pub in the King's Road when you went by on the team bus. Now that
Well,
shouldn't
you
have
were,
happened.
I didn't know that, Alan. I assumed you were there in all of it. I
Well,
had
I
no
know
idea.
because you know at that time there was about 100,000 people in the streets, weren't there? You know, and you know you don't think where's so and so, where's so and so. But I was standing in the pub at the World's End when the
Yeah,
actual bus went by. I was standing with my family and my friends, and they said, "Why aren't you on there?" I said, "I was too upset because I
that was
didn't feel a part of winning it.
yeah.
Made the semi-final, but it was hurtful. It was, and I've told somebody this before. It wasn't until I come out of my coma all them years later that I realised I got everything. You know, why don't worry about that no more. I've just escaped dying, and that kind of released me from the from
Yeah.
the that nightmare, because it was a nightmare. I had nightmares over it. They're only a game of football. That's why I mentioned Paul Reaney earlier on. No one's ever heard his side of the story. And I know every year before that, they used to call it the Wembley jinx, didn't they? Someone broke a leg or missed a game or whatever. You know, there's always something happened around the FA Cup final. It just happened to be
Yeah.
me and Paul Reaney at that time. And I tried to get hold of him about 10 years ago to do a show with him about it, you
Yeah.
know, to see how he felt, you know, because it would have been interesting. But
What was his answer?
no, I didn't get him in the end.
Oh.
You know, I think I didn't really. I don't know. He might have kicked me. I don't know. He kicked you a couple of times, didn't he?
Charlie, can I just, Charlie, in the interest of fairness, I put this question to Alan. I've got to put it to you as well, because you had a bit of a bad boy reputation when you were younger at Chelsea. Were you tough to handle for Dave?
I think on as far as training or getting to things on time and or late, yes, I was a good pro in that sense. I come in and worked my butt off and did what I was told. I was no problem in that respect. I think I was a stupid socially, really stupid idiot, just like many of us get. And I don't think it was hard to handle. I was never in any kind of confrontational situation with Dave or any other manager that I've been under. But if you ask me, would I do things different now? Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I'm not proud of some of the stuff, and would certainly change it. But it's done and dusted. No way you can change it now.
Charlie, you're spot on, and as I say, I hold my hands up. But I can only say one thing: that everything I did wrong, it should have been put right by the manager. The managers should have sorted it out. I didn't do it in spite of anything. I was a young kid, brought up in the King's Road, born in the King's Road, and it was not in the late 60s, early 70s. It was like a party every day, you know.
Yeah, but Alan, I think also whenever the coach, shall we say Dave, whenever Dave moved to do anything about it, it was always a finger pointing back at Dave saying, and complaints about what he was doing or what the club was doing. And I don't think there was a lot of people at the club, including myself, who were taking the responsibility we should have been taking, you know. I put myself right in the middle of that too. I would never point my finger back and say it was anybody else's fault but my own. No question about it. And I wouldn't say that young players were foolishly or badly handled. I think that's unfair myself.
Yeah. Well, that's the way I see it. If I was manager, I would have come down on me. I would have saw as a young
exactly.
player.
But you wouldn't have liked it, would you? You wouldn't have liked it, and you'd have reacted. Be
Well, I
fair.
don't know. I don't know if I'd have liked it. I mean, if it was for my own good, I think there would, yeah, it would have been different. It would have been different. I didn't like the way, right at the end, after bit, I think what it added up to with me and Ozzy, he just had enough of, instead of telling us as we went along that you're out of order, he should have had a fight with Ozzy. They kept shaping up to each other. They should have threw a punch, Ozzy wanted to hit him and he wanted to hit Ozzy, so they should have done it.
It should never have gotten to that point.
No, that's what I'm saying. Well, that's bad management,
Alan,
Charlie.
from both perspectives, it shouldn't have gotten to that from Dave's point of view. But it shouldn't have got to that point of view from you and Ozzy's point of view either. I mean, to say it was all kind of one-sided or there was one simple reason for it, I don't think that's fair,
No.
I think I was more than guilty most of the time, and none of these things would have ever surfaced if it hadn't been for some kind of misbehaviour, either on my part or a group's part, and we brought it on ourselves. I also think. Sorry.
Can I just ask another question, guys? Can I just ask another question? Did you? I mean, that Chelsea team of the late '60s, early '70s had a reputation. No question about that. Did you ever get together collectively as a team, as a squad, and talk about the reputation you were gaining? And were there any steps within the squad to rectify that situation?
We were on tour one day. We'd been out on a boat, Trinidad or somewhere. We'd been fishing. We was all out on the boat. Charlie, Tommy, Nobby Houseman was me up the front. Ozzy, Mickey Drive fell in with the sharks and all that when Ozzy was shouting out sharks and all that kind of stuff. And we got back that night and we'd had a great day out fishing and drinking. And we got back and we got hold of Ron Stewart and we said to Ron Stewart, can you ask Dave to come down? We're all in the bar. We're all sitting around the table. And I said, can Dave come down? We want to have a chat. We're not happy with the way things are going. We told Ron. And he come down and he said, Dave will be down in half an hour. Dave never turned up. Now, that for me is not good enough. Unacceptable. If it had been the other way around, can you imagine?
Well, I can imagine.
Hey. He was a manager and he should have managed that situation so much better. He should have stuck to coaching.
Alan, I don't recollect any of this, but just on the face of it, what you're saying, I would say, what is this summoning a manager? Summoning a manager? A bunch of guys sitting around half drunk?
Well, it ain't our fault he didn't like a drink. This was the team matter, because he didn't drink, it didn't mean that you could drink in front of him.
This is surreal.
I stood at the bridge one day and all the boys were at the bar years and years later, 20 years later, and I turned around to him and I said, he was looking at all the boys at the bar having a drink, having a laugh and a joke, and I turned around and I said, what do you reckon then? Did it bring back memories? And he went, yeah, all great memories. And I thought, you fucking liar,
Yeah.
Don't lie. Yeah.
Oh my God.
He couldn't. The bottom line is he could not control us, and that is a weakness. That's a weakness of management.
If I'd been your manager and you'd sent a message to come down and talk with us, I'd have come down with a bazooka.
Oh God, that'd have been good. We'd have took it off you and shot you.